Welcome back to Miles Reads. I'm Miles. Today, we're going to talk about the book The Art of Stillness, Adventures in Going Nowhere. First, let's picture this. A 29-year-old man works in a Manhattan skyscraper, just 4 blocks from Times Square. His apartment is at the corner of Park Avenue and 20th Street, a neighborhood of New York's super rich. His job? Reporting on international affairs for the premier magazine, Time. His colleagues are a group of like-minded young people, free of family burdens, ready to grab a backpack and appear anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. The job is liberating, thrilling, and full of the unknown. Sounds amazing, right? Like something straight out of a movie. It's the kind of life that gets your blood pumping. But there's always another side to the story. When you run too fast, it's easy to lose your way. If we're being honest, even if our own lives aren't quite that dramatic, most of us are already buried in work. The office encroaches on our days off and weekends vanish. After landing a big project, we either celebrate by getting drunk or going on a shopping spree. But that kind of ecstatic joy is fleeting. After the noise fades, what often follows is a deeper sense of emptiness, loss, or even confusion. At gatherings with friends, we often hear someone say, "I don't know what I really want." Modern life has us all spun around by its frantic pace. We're like our doctors, constantly racing to save others. But when it's time to heal ourselves, we can't find a single effective prescription. So what can we do? That young man jet-setting around the world from Manhattan faced the same problem decades before us. How did he break through? His method was bold. He escaped his seemingly dream life. He left the hustle and bustle of New York and moved to the ancient city of Kyoto, Japan. There, he lived in a humble room for over a year and began to experience the power of going nowhere. He called this remedy nowhere. He discovered that going nowhere helps you find your true direction, allowing you to see the world more clearly and love it more profoundly. Later, he wrote it all down in the book we're recommending today, The Art of Stillness. Think of it as a prescription, a book that introduces you to the power of stillness and a way of life embraced by companies like Google. The author is Pico Iyer. Born in Britain in 1957, he was educated at Eton, Oxford, and Harvard. He is a writer, journalist, traveler, and scholar. Starting in 1986, Iyer became a reporter for Time magazine while also writing columns for more than 20 other publications, including the New York Times. He is the man from our opening scene. Today, he serves as a distinguished presidential fellow at Chapman University. After its publication, this book drew enormous attention. Some critics hailed it as a modern-day Walden, saying it leads readers on a spiritual journey to find themselves. It also landed Pico Iyer a spot on the TED stage, where he shared his adventure in search of nowhere, the core theme of the book, with an audience of hundreds of thousands. Let us be real. The market is flooded with self-help books. The term chicken soup for the soul, once a compliment, has become a slightly negative label over the past decade. Some people even joke that it's become more like spiritual poison. Many of these so-called inspirational books talk down to you, telling you what you should do. But this book is completely different. It's not a meditation guide or a religious pamphlet. It's simply a sincere invitation from the author to join him on a journey to explore nowhere. Pico Iyer teaches us one thing. Going nowhere isn't about shutting yourself off from the world, but about stepping away from it for a moment, time and again. The Art of Stillness makes its case in 3 main parts. First, where we are is ultimately determined by the perspective we choose, not by the places we go. Second, reaching nowhere doesn't require a life of asceticism. It can be achieved in the course of our daily lives. Third, in an age of information overload, the ability to filter information is far more important than the ability to collect it. Let's break these down one by one. First, where we are is ultimately determined by the perspective we choose, not by the places we go. Many people believe that the breadth of one's view determines the quality of one's life. This might be true, but our understanding of view is often too narrow and simplistic. We tend to think that the more places we visit, the more things we do, and the more of the world we see, the better we'll understand how to live and what happiness is. But that's not how life really works. In fact, A huge part of our lives takes place inside our own heads. And one of our biggest struggles is the inability to sit quietly alone with ourselves. This isn't to say travel has no value. When Iyer began drawing strength from nowhere, he was still traveling the world. But he found that the full meaning of his travels only emerged and deepened when he returned home and took the time to sit still, to digest and reflect on what he had seen and felt. This kind of happiness might be different from what most people imagine. It's only when you experience this other kind of joy that you grasp the true meaning of stillness. Consider the story of Leonard Cohen. The Canadian artist, first famous for his poetry and novels, later became a folk music legend, setting his poems to music and embarking on a troubadour's life. He achieved massive success, including a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Yet this is the very icon who one would expect to be forever on the road, who chose to move to a Zen center on a California mountaintop. There, he served an elderly Japanese Rashi and lived a life of stillness, striving to simplify everything. When the author visited him, the 61-year-old Cohen, who had tasted all the world had to offer, had just spent 7 days and nights sitting motionless in a bare meditation hall. His Buddhist name meant silent one, the quiet between two thoughts. Cohen said that through meditation, he found a focused joy, what he called a profound, enticing, and spectacular entertainment that contained the most authentic experiences. He didn't come to this remote, quiet place out of piety or a quest for holiness. It was simply the most practical way he could find to escape the confusion and fear that had long plagued him. Sitting quietly with the old Japanese Zen master, sipping tea and listening to the chirping of crickets outside in the dead of night, this was the closest thing Cohen found to lasting happiness, a way of being in love with the world. Cohen seemed to have had everything, yet it was only after leaving it all behind that he truly found happiness and freedom. In meditation, there is no stage, no performance, nothing to do but quietly observe the thoughts that arise in your mind. This awakens something deeper than your present self. You discover that making a living and making a life can be two very different things. Then there's the story of Matthew Ricard, a Frenchman with a PhD in molecular biology. At 21, he took a trip to Nepal and was deeply moved by the joy and insight radiating from the local monks. 5 years later, he gave up a promising scientific career and moved to the Himalayas to live as they did. He is the subject of the bestseller The Monk and the Philosopher and is often called the happiest man in the world, invited to speak globally about how happiness can be trained like a muscle. His explanation of the mind is crystal clear. For example, he says, trying to find happiness while remaining caught up in trivial things is as futile as reaching into a raging fire, hoping not to get burned. Years later, Matthew published a photography collection that serves as an ultimate travel guide. While preparing it, he spent a year living in a small cabin high in the mountains of Nepal. He would only go out once or twice a week to photograph the scene in front of his home. The views were largely the same, yet they were transformed by the shifting clouds, rain, and seasons, and even more so by the shifting landscape of the photographer's own mind. The book is called A Journey of Stillness, but it's really a portrait of an inner world. It shows you what a person's heart and life look like when they step into nowhere everywhere you look. There are new colors and new beauty, even though the world outside hasn't changed at all. Tired of the fast-paced city life, the author, Pico, decided to make a change. In addition to finding brief moments of peace in monasteries, he moved to Kyoto for an extended period. He and his wife lived in a tiny apartment with no car, no bicycles, no separate bedroom, and no television. Iyer supported his family through travel and writing, but because he was free from distractions, he woke up every morning feeling as if a vast meadow and mountains stretching to the horizon were laid out before him. This is the first point. The perspective we choose is what ultimately determines where we are. Now for the second point. Reaching nowhere doesn't require a life of asceticism. It can be achieved in our daily lives. After hearing those examples, you might think nowhere advocates for a life of isolation that only by withdrawing from society like Cohen or Ricard can one find inner peace. But for most of us, that's completely out of reach. However, when Iyer talks about going to nowhere, he doesn't mean we have to live in seclusion. It's more about getting in intimate contact with our own senses, and it's something that can be done in our everyday lives. In other words, taking a moment to empty our minds during a busy workday. Only by doing this can we keep our bearings in a world that is accelerating like mad. Nowhere should be a stop along the journey. That's what keeps it alive and prevents it from becoming a rigid habit. In fact, Leonard Cohen didn't stay on the mountain all the time. He would drive down the hill for a satisfying filet-o-fish at McDonald's, then go back to his home in Los Angeles and watch talk shows on TV. After a day or two, once he had burned off his restlessness, he would drive back up to the mountain, but never with the resolution to spend the rest of his life there. At the age of 73, Cohen even embarked on a 6-year world tour, performing over 300 shows, each lasting more than 3 hours. His concerts were like a ritual in a temple, an art form deepened by stillness. In 2012, Cohen's new album, Old Ideas, explored themes of mortality with a nearly static, slow tempo, yet it miraculously topped music charts around the world. Perhaps people were searching for the clarity and wisdom that only a man who had been to nowhere could offer. Once, the author ran into Matthew Ricard and asked him a question common among travelers. "You fly all over the world. How do you deal with jet lag?" Matthew looked at him with some surprise and said, "For me, flying is like a short retreat. You can't do anything in the air. It's total freedom. I don't go anywhere. I just sit there and look at the clouds and the blue sky. Everything is still, and yet everything is in motion. The view is magnificent." Matthew wasn't just being profound. Later, on a flight from Frankfurt to Los Angeles, Iyer noticed a young woman next to him who, for the entire 12-hour flight, simply sat quietly. She didn't do anything, she didn't sleep, and she seemed perfectly content. As the plane descended, Iyer finally worked up the courage to ask her about it. She said she was German and had a very demanding job in social work. This was a 5-week vacation to Hawaii to offset her stressful life in Berlin. She liked to start distressing on the plane, she explained, so that by the time she arrived in Hawaii, her mind would be at peace and she could start enjoying her vacation immediately. On a trip from New York to California, the author tried it himself. He turned off the screen in front of him but didn't force himself to do nothing. When a thought came, he jotted it down in a notebook. The rest of the time, he let his mind wander or just lay back, as relaxed as a dog on a sunny beach. He got home at 3 a.m. but felt exceptionally clear-headed. For the last hour before bed, he turned off the lights and let music wash over him as he drifted off. When he woke up the next day, he felt as refreshed and new as the world outside. Pico Iyer once mentioned on a radio show that Gandhi made time for meditation every day. An anxious woman called in to complain, "I'm a mother and I'm starting a business. Where am I supposed to find time to meditate every day?" Her complaint sounds reasonable. But if you think about it, it's precisely the busiest people who most need to give themselves time to unwind. Studies have shown that stress is contagious. If that mother could ask a family member or friend to watch her child for just 30 minutes a day, giving her a moment to quiet her mind, she would be more clear-headed, more willing to connect with others, and a more positive person all around after that break. More often than not, we can reach nowhere in very simple ways. Set up an auto-reply for your email, turn off the TV at the gym on a particularly hectic day, find a quiet corner in a noisy city. These small, simple acts can open up a whole new space in our ordinary, busy lives. That's the second point. Reaching nowhere doesn't require a life of asceticism. It can be achieved in our daily lives. Finally, let's look at the last point. In an age of information overload, the ability to filter information is more important than the ability to collect it. For years, we've been taught to be good at gathering information, and we've come to take it for granted. But in today's world, where information isn't scarce but overwhelming, the ability to filter is far more crucial. The logic is simple. The more information we receive, the less time we have to process each piece. Technology hasn't taught us how to use technology wisely. Iyer says that one of his most surprising discoveries while traveling the world was that the very people developing the latest technologies are the most disciplined about limiting technology in their own lives. Kevin Kelly, known as the godfather of the world internet, is a fervent advocate for new tech. But surprisingly, Kelly himself doesn't use a smartphone and has no television at home. He sometimes travels to villages in Asia and deliberately leaves his computer behind. He does this to stay rooted in the real world. As Kelly has said, "I try to keep a distance from all kinds of technologies so that I can more easily remember who I am." When Pico Iyer visited the Google headquarters, he was struck by the trampolines and indoor treehouses. Google employees can use 1/5 of their work time on personal projects. The company also offers all sorts of activities to regulate mind and body. For example, Google's chief evangelist started an internal yoglers program to help employees who practice yoga become yoga teachers. A software engineer created a 7-week course called Search Inside Yourself, which over 1,000 employees have taken. It uses a wealth of scientific evidence to show that meditation can help them think more clearly, improve their health, and boost their emotional intelligence. At Google, employees can step into a conference room to meditate, let their minds wander, and seek inspiration at any time of day or night. Today, 1/3 of all companies in the US have stress reduction programs, and that number is rising. For both companies and employees, clearing the channels of the mind is a wonderful thing. For instance, Intel experimented with a 4-hour quiet thinking time every Thursday, during which 300 engineers and managers turned off their email and phones and put "Do Not Disturb" signs on their doors. The project was so well received that Intel launched an 8-week program to encourage employees to engage in more mindful thinking. For high-intensity tech companies, this is a preemptive measure against what the World Health Organization has called the 21st century epidemic: stress. In Silicon Valley, many people observe a weekly internet Sabbath. From Friday evening to Monday morning, they turn off most of their electronic devices to regain their sense of direction and balance for the new week. This is the core message of the book, The Art of Stillness. Let's recap. First, where we are is ultimately determined by the perspective we choose, not by the places we go. Second, reaching nowhere doesn't require a life of asceticism. It can be achieved in the course of our daily lives. Third, in an age of information overload, the ability to filter information is far more important than the ability to collect it. Ultimately, the author believes that deep down, everyone needs some white space in their lives. Just as a piece of music needs rests and pauses to create a moving resonance, our lives need stillness. This book isn't a meditation manual or a religious tract. It advocates for a way of life. Turn off the computer, put away the phone, escape the noise of the city, and, through a moment of stillness, enter a vaster inner world. Life is like a giant painting. When we stand right up against it, all we see are chaotic, ever-changing details. It's only when we take a few steps back and stand still that we can see the grander picture on the canvas. Returning to quiet isn't about what you can offer a temple or a mountaintop. It's about what you can bring back from that stillness to the noisy, complicated world we live in. Very often, the best way to change your life is simply to change the way you look at it. Congratulations on finishing another book. See you tomorrow.